Hello, beautiful light-filled souls. I hope that you are having a beautiful summer and meditating and feeling that connection and healing from the other side. I still am on a bit of a high from the summit. The third annual Near-Death Experience Summit was so much fun. If you want to join my community, my spiritual community, starting in September, you can still do that. I want to read from the book of poetry that just released today, Loving Narcissus and Sometimes God. It's really that and sometimes God that is the saving grace of my life and probably many people's lives, that when we focus too much on the physical plane in this world and how things are going and our romances and our finances and everything else, we can lose that connection that is so healing and so beautiful and sets everything right. So the second half of that book is really about these beautiful moments that add connection and add depth to life, and that and sometimes God is my favorite part of the book, but you can't have one without the other. You can't have the struggle in the physical without the answer in the spiritual. So I am happy that that title came to me, but I want to read some of the poems from the And Sometimes God, and then maybe leave you with a message from each of them. But this poem is titled Dreamland. Give me guilt-free days in an endless, flooded dreamland of green, wild alyssum and just born butterflies a few feet away from our heavy heads, resting on a quilt my grandmother made. We might tell a few stories and our kisses might lead somewhere later that night, or not, but our ties to earth and heaven will be loosened long enough to breathe out molecules of our past and create an enviable, simple, present tense life. So what I wanted to convey with that poem is really the importance of letting the past go and being very much in the beauty of the present, and also just aware of how amazing our natural world is, that there's a truth in nature that sets our bodies and our spirits in line with what is. And when you're very present and very aware of the beauty of a moment, then life kind of expands, becomes timeless. That near-death experience showed me a timeless place, and the closest that I can find to it here is meditation and being very conscious and very aware of the beauty and the depth of certain moments in nature. I've felt the energy of different animals at times and insects, and that's just a beautiful thing as well, to know that they have an energy and a consciousness and sometimes even a love that expands around them. That is what partially I meant by that particular poem, but it's also a happier conclusion to the first part of the book, Loving Narcissus. Flying is the physical sensation of love, like a flock of startled Canadian geese rising up from a pond, blood rising in your veins, fear, anticipation. If you have memories before birth, they are a flight of colors of people who you know, who you now know, and laughter. The choice to experience the eternal in temporary fleeting moments is why we call love flying. One of my favorite poets is Mary Oliver, and she often uses nature and she uses these beautiful moments to add depth to life. And I was thinking in that poem about, why do people call love falling? And I think it is because it's this connection of the eternal meeting the temporary, and it just feels overwhelming. You know, that moment of, wow, this part of me goes on forever, but there's this other part of me that is temporary, and how do I make sense of that? I think that's something that everyone struggles with, but near-death experiencers struggle with in a different way, and that we really understand we're eternal, and we're kind of confused sometimes by this physical part of of ourselves that we know is temporary, but we also love it. I was just talking in an interview, which probably will post soon, with the Southern Belle medium Tamara Richardson. She was also at my summit, and we were talking about how in that space outside of the body, we were like, whatever, who cares about the body? Like this total disconnection. But then once we're in it, I love my coffee. I love my dinner. I love my pets. I love walking in nature. There's so much about being me and being the physical me that I love that I get attached to it again. So I understand people's fear of death because there is an attachment to being you and being the physical you. But all I can say is that, like those geese that fly away, they don't look back at the pond and wish they were back in the pond. They are the flight. And that's kind of what the spirit is like. It becomes the flight. And then you leave the vessel or the moment behind, and it is just a natural transition. I'm going to read you one more poem in the And Loving God section. I have to skip around a bit, but this one is simple, but this is one of my messages from the afterlife. Be like a little child. Before so many words were scribbled across my memory, I knew how to project myself into a flock of birds. I would close my eyes and fly into the center of an orange sky. When I rested my body on the grass, melting into the earth like rain, rabbits came so close that I could hear them chew. Faith was a concrete moment, real as a conversation, a meal, or a degree. I was sunlight, and my heart touched everything lightly. So I've reflected for a long time on why I heard be like a little child on the other side. And one of the reasons I think I was told this is so many people, and you can see it in people who are highly serious and very adult-like, lose a playfulness about themselves. They lose an ability to be joyful and enjoy simple moments like laying down in the grass or watching animals in nature. And I think that that simplicity of heart and that access to faith opens greater doors. It opens a magic and a creativity and a love and a world that is beautiful. And the more people get in touch with that part of themselves, the happier they are. And I think that, the other side, I think that God wants us to be happy and access that joy, not to be so weighted down and take everything so seriously, but to get out there and really just enjoy life and enjoy the simple moments. So there's a couple of poems from the And Sometimes God section of Loving Narcissus and Sometimes God. I don't want to say too much about the first part of the book, but it is, I made another video where I talked about the title poem of Loving Narcissus, and that's the Greek myth. So yes, I could have had just a whole book on loving Narcissus, but that's not as interesting as perhaps loving Narcissus, the Greek myth, and the personification of anyone who's self-absorbed. It doesn't have to be an actual narcissist. This can just be someone who's selfish or someone who is very concerned with themselves and their lives. And I think in the American culture, there's a lot of that. You live in a materialistic culture, and it's all about your success and what you're doing and your image and are you getting enough out of life, instead of going, hey, are we a great big happy family? Are we a great big unity of people? How's my community doing? And when my community's doing well, I'm doing better. And I know that the greatest happiness of my life has been when I know that my students are doing well and succeeding, when I know that a greater number of people around me are doing well. And so I think there's some natural unhappiness to a highly individualistic culture. I'm not saying we have to change. I'm just saying that every person, if you are feeling unhappy, if you shift your focus into service and community, I promise you do feel better. You do. It may not initially feel like what you want to do, because you may think you're suffering in many ways, and you may be suffering in many ways, but when you get out of your own suffering and help others, it is the greatest feeling in the world. So there's a lot to the And Sometimes God section of the book. I hope you enjoy it. If you enjoy poetry, I feel incredibly blessed to put this book of poetry out there. It's not how I thought my journey would go at all. I thought years ago when I was writing poetry that I would work very hard and get this book into an academic press, but I realized that, I have a community of people who enjoy some of my writing and who think like me and want to do similar things and want to put their creative work out there. So I thought, hey, why not just do it? Most academic poets and most presses that publish poetry, they're really happy if some of the most well-known names sell just a tiny, tiny fraction of what these Instagram poets are able to sell when it comes to poetry. So I'm not doing this for any other reason other than art is what matters to me and has mattered to me since I was 14. And I know that part of my soul's journey is just to put this artwork out there and let anyone who appreciates it appreciate it. So thank you so much for attending the summit, and thank you for your interest in poetry. I will post the links below. The book is live today. I haven't even gotten a hard copy of it yet. I hope that it printed it well. I'll get it in a few days, but the ebook is live and so is the paperback. So may you be blessed and talk to you soon.